Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Masser, and we all know we were starved for content during the pandemic, and we got it in the form of a 10-part series that aired. It was a documentary on ESPN. It was the most watched documentary on ESPN, and it was called The Last Dance. And of course, who directed it was Jason Hare. He is with us now. He is 7-time Emmy-winning director and producer. Jason, so good to have you here with us. I can't tell you how many people came up to me when they knew I was going to talk to you because they loved it. Men, women, all kinds of ages. Tell us about this documentary because a lot had happened before you were brought in, right? It had been filmed. A lot of footage had been shot. It was 22 years ago. Michael Jordan was on board. Tell us when you were asked to be a part of it and tell us what that was like. I mean, I'm assuming you said yes from the get-go.
I said yes before they finished the sentence when they asked me if I would be interested in doing the project. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so Michael Jordan's career in the Bulls dynasty parallels my trajectory as a sports fan and as a pop cultural fanatic. I was 8 years old when he came into the league, and that was '84, and I was a senior in college in '98 when this season was filmed, the Last Dance season was filmed. So that kind of took me through my childhood. So for them to even mention that name or this subject, it was an easy yes. What wasn't easy was that it took them 2 years to get to the starting line in a business sense, because you had four major entities, multi-billion-dollar entities in Jump 23, which is Michael's company, the NBA, ESPN, and Netflix, to all get to the same table and to agree logistically, creatively, financially that they were going to collaborate on something like this. It took 2 full years. I actually did a full-length documentary while they were negotiating this, and then I came back and the timing worked out. So we started in January of 2018 officially, and we finished it up while you were watching it.
Well, so tell me about, I think when you described to me getting these four behemoths together, Netflix, ESPN, Michael Jordan's company, and then the NBA, that it was like turning an oil tanker. What were you privy to in terms of the negotiations? Because first of all, I mean, they were, I guess, maybe once or twice all at the same table, but a lot of it was done virtually.
Well, that was afterwards. The negotiations I'm not privy to at all because, like I said, I was working on a different project. And when they finally had their ducks in a row and everything was figured out logistically and the budget was figured out and we could go and start to shoot, it's a challenge always to answer to one distributor, be that a network or a production company, what have you. This was 4 distributors, and the biggest distributors you could possibly imagine, all coming into the same virtual room like we're talking right now. I am a face-to-face person, and I always wanted. I don't like 15 voices on a phone. I don't really like 3 voices on a phone. So I was always endeavoring to get people to the same table so that we could all sit there and sketch things out, literally on a pad or on an overhead or show slides or things like that. We only had 2 times in the entire making of this doc when we got all of the parties involved into one room to hash out exactly what our likes and dislikes were about other people's visions at the table. So there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And oftentimes...
Go ahead. I was going to say,
often
you guys are
tough, but in this case, it actually there's the DNA of each of those 4 entities is in the finished product.
Right, and you can definitely see it. What happened though? Because it was originally supposed to air right in the summer of 2020, and then all of a sudden with COVID and everybody kind of just dying for looking for content, you guys sped up the release date. What was that like?
Yeah, we knew. I think March 11th was what's called the Rudy Gobert game. That's when Rudy Gobert tested positive and they canceled on site just before tip-off the Jazz and Oklahoma City Thunder game. And after that, that's the last time I saw my staff was the day after that, because very quickly the lockdown went into effect in New York. And I was thinking, because this is supposed to air in conjunction with the NBA Finals, June 2nd is when it was supposed to air. So I was thinking, okay, the NBA Finals are now not going to happen until, at least in our minds, it was like they're going to delay them maybe a month, because I think at that point, none of us had really any idea how severe this was. And I was thinking, oh, we have an extra month to do this. And then as the days passed by that weekend, I realized, oh, no, they're going to want to move this up almost 2 months. So we ended up settling on April 19th as our premiere date. So we were literally finishing episodes 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 as episodes 1 and 2 were airing on April 19th. So it was normally you have some time to shoot and then edit and then relax, and then you do a little bit of promotion and you can watch it at home with your families. We were watching on one screen and editing another episode for next week on another.
Yeah, no relaxing here. So, all right, I know everybody's waiting to talk to us about the interviews. My understanding is, I think you told me you did 105 interviews, 106 shoots. Tell us about those interviews. They were with some pretty amazing people.
Yeah, it was. We had an embarrassment of riches. I mean, it's a testament, first of all, to Michael actually diving in and committing to this, and his team committing to this, that these people who were featured in this doc, a lot of them get these kind of phone calls all the time to be a part of a story like this, or to tell the Michael Jordan story or the story of 80s and 90s basketball. And so many times that oftentimes they don't even pick up the phone. So Michael and his team drafted a letter and said, Jason and his team are going to be calling you. Michael is participating in this one. Essentially, this is the real thing. We're actually doing this now. So then that greased the wheels for myself and my team to be able to call people. And we had already been vetted because Michael had already notified all of the parties. We gave them a list of about 150 people that we might be contacting, and then they reached out to those 150. So, I mean, to sit down and experience talking to these people, I wouldn't even know where to begin if you said, who's the most interesting interview you conducted, because it goes all the way from Barack Obama and President Clinton to Michael himself in his interview, dwarfed any expectations that I had or hopes that I had. It was exceeded those expectations, all the way down to Steve Kerr's mom, who was one of the most impressive people that I've ever met, and Michael's mom herself as well. So we had 105. We interviewed 105 people. There were 106 shoots, as you said, and there were very few, if any, duds in that entire bunch.
Well, I did ask you when we spoke yesterday. I said, so which interview stuck out? And you said, okay, the boring answer is Michael, but it really was the most incredible interview. You spoke with him 3 times.
Yeah, we spoke with him in January 2018, and then in 2019, we spoke with him in May and December. He was only contracted for 2 interviews for his involvement in this, and we quickly realized that the interviews were going so well, they took longer than I thought they would, and by the time the second interview ended, we only had material for 6 or 7 episodes. I still hadn't gotten to episodes 8, 9, and 10 in our storyline. So he and his team were gracious enough to grant us a few more hours for me to sit there and bug him with questions. But he came in that first day, and it was very, very clear. I didn't know what Michael to expect. I didn't know if he was going to get up after a half hour and say, that's all I'm giving you. I didn't know if he was going to be offended by some of the questions, or if he was going to try and direct me in some places. It was suspenseful, to say the least.
Well, Jason, tell me about, because I asked you specifically, because I was, going through some of the clips and stuff, and there's that one where he's like in the white outfit and the white background. He's got a drink next to him and he's got a cigar. You said that when you walked in, you knew it was going to be a different kind of interview.
Yeah, once
he was kind of relaxed and yeah.
I'm used to seeing him. At that point, we had done 2 years of research before we rolled cameras on that interview. So I had seen just about every Michael Jordan interview that had ever been conducted. And what I really wanted to do with his interview and some of the other main characters was make this seem a little bit more relaxed in a home setting. Oftentimes it was their home. Phil Jackson was his backyard. To get to the real person rather than the icon that we're used to seeing either pre-game or post-game in a scrum of media. So for Michael to sit down in that chair and kind of kick his legs out and be really relaxed, he had just played golf that day. He had a cigar. He had a drink next to him. It was clear that this was going to be almost kind of a window into what it's like to hang out with Michael Jordan, rather than this rigid interview that he normally does for other events.
So tell me, you did ask him why he wanted to do this documentary now. What did he say?
Well, originally I asked, the first time I met him was 2 years before we shot, and I asked him, why do you want to do this? And he said, I don't. And I said, why not? And he said, because when people see this footage, it's very raw, it's very revealing, and I don't think that they're going to have the context to understand why I was acting that way sometimes towards my teammates, towards my opponents. I mean, as anyone who watched the series knows, he can be a vicious guy and a ruthless competitor. So I tried to impress upon him in that first brief meeting that you're going to have 10 hours of context to provide these viewers. This is actually the time where you can silence all of the critics that you think you have in regards to these topics and others. So by the time he got there 2 years later, I think it was 20 minutes into that first interview, I asked him about arriving in Chicago as a rookie. And I said that one writer called that '84 Bulls team the traveling Chicago Bulls cocaine circus. And Michael threw his head back and laughed. I had never heard that laugh come out of him in the research I'd done or in the time that I had spent with him in person. So that would have been enough for him to validate that statement just with his laughter. He's very adept at dodging a question like that. Not only did he not dodge it, he laughed and validated it and then went on to give us an anecdote about his time there as a kid coming straight from Chapel Hill and witnessing all of these things. So we knew very early on that he was both feet in on this.
You did go into some really tough moments of his life, the death of his father, his gambling. Were any topics that you were told, listen, you guys got to back off, or was it really fair game, everything?
There was nothing ever. I was expecting. I mean, if you made a checklist of the things that would be considered sensitive in his life, the gambling, as you mentioned, his father's tragic death, the murder of his father, the accusations, unfounded accusations that he was somehow responsible for that murder. His gambling was responsible for it. His quote unquote suspension, was he suspended from the league or did he leave of his own volition? His ruthlessness towards teammates, punching Steve Kerr, the Republicans buy sneakers too statement. If you took that checklist and you said, all right, you can only have 2 of these, I would have been happy with that. Just knowing how I've had 22 years experience seeing how superstars are coddled and their personas are molded by their teams. We hit every single one of those topics. And in fact, he wanted to discuss them more sometimes in the subsequent interviews. So I was pleasantly surprised that we were never told. Michael himself told me, you can ask me anything you want. I'm going to give you an honest answer, because I sent him a list of the topics just to jog his memory and say, we're going to be talking about this, this, this. He said, I didn't even open your email. Ask me anything you want and I'll be honest every time.
Jason, was there a moment when you were interviewing him and putting this together, but more specifically interviewing him, where you just kind of like stopped for a moment and realized we're getting something new, maybe that the world just doesn't realize about Michael Jordan?
I think if people who watch the series, the end of episode 7, it's what we called internally the "Who I Am" speech. It's one of those moments when you're interviewing somebody that you know, okay, this is going to resonate, and a light bulb goes off kind of in the room collectively that this is kind of changed the structure of this documentary. I asked him, I was curious as to whether or not he was ambivalent about all the greatness and all the titles and that reputation for being this the ultimate competitor and the ultimate achiever, if that was worth the cost of being considered a nice guy. Because in my experience, he is a nice guy, and in the crew's experience, he is a nice guy. But I don't think if you ask the general public what's the first thing that comes to mind with Michael Jordan, they may not think he's a bad guy, but they think ruthless competitor, they think animal, will to win, 6-0 in the finals, 6 MVPs, but nice guy is not known as a teddy bear. And I wanted to know if he was conflicted in all about that reputation that he had built over the years. And what followed was an answer from his heart. I think the full answer lasts about 7 minutes. We cut it down to about 2.5. And by the end, he was choked up and he asked our cameras to break. And of course, we granted that and let him take a break. And I looked around at our camera crew and my fellow producers, and all of us kind of raised our eyebrows and said, this is now more than just a documentary about a basketball team and a basketball player. This is about a human being, the human being behind the icon. So that was a moment where, and that was only 45 minutes into the first interview, a few minutes after that cocaine circus question I told you about. So it was very clear early on that he was going to devote all of himself to this.
Is that your favorite moment, or do you have a favorite moment of doing this project, putting it together, talking to these people about Michael?
Favorite moment of the project, I think that my pride in this project comes from how proud I am of the team that we put together and the team that was assembled and what we did in the months of March, April, and May, because we were apart from each other. I still haven't seen some of the people that I worked very, very closely with. And as you know, in production, you become a family.
Yeah.
So
right.
We had these visions of the final day of the edit. It was going to be the spring. We would all go out to the Hudson River to this bar, and we would raise a glass, and everyone would party that night and relax. We didn't have that moment, but I have tremendous pride, and I always will, for the team that we put together, the team of editors and producers and PAs and the entire staff that put this together and gave their heart and soul to it. So that's what I remember more than anything about this project.
Well, that's a great director to really thank your team. It's an incredible documentary. It's been the documentary everybody's been talking about. Jason, thank you so much for doing it for us. And thank you for joining this conversation. We really appreciate it. Jason, thank you. Jason Hare,
Bye.
everybody.
Hello, I'm Joel Weber, the editor of Bloomberg Business Week. It's such a privilege that I get to speak with one of our Bloomberg 50 honorees today, Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. Kristalina, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you took over the IMF a little more than a year ago. What's it been like to start a dream job and then have the world get turned upside down by the pandemic?
It was testing, and it was also a moment of action. And I can tell you that I came through this year feeling very proud of the staff of the IMF. We have done in a couple of months so much and so fast that we really don't have precedent in our history. We have provided financial support to 83 countries. But most importantly, we moved out of the traditional orthodoxy on what we are supposed to say, which is when you're in trouble, tighten up. My best line probably during this crisis is to policymakers: spend. Keep the receipts, but spend. And I don't think there are many cases in the history of the fund when the managing director would be appealing to countries to spend more. The year, of course, is finishing with a brighter light. Vaccines are coming, but I have no doubt that 2021 is not going to be a simple and easy year either.
So let's talk about that. Let's look ahead to 2021. What are you most concerned about as you look ahead? You mentioned the vaccine. There's some hope there, but what are the areas that look like, any potential problems that you want the world to be aware of?
Well, the most important policy issue next year is going to be vaccines. Vaccines policy would be at the heart of economic policy. I worry about two things. The first one is that we get carried away. Vaccines are not a magic wand. You do not have them to waive all the impact of the pandemic. There will be scarring, and we will have to manage through not the simplest of years. There will be structural shift. We are saying to policymakers, do not withdraw support prematurely, but eventually there has to be withdrawal of this support, and the risk of doing it either too fast or without thinking of how you cushion the transition for firms and workers is absolutely there. My second worry, that we will miss an opportunity for transformation. 2021 can be a fantastic year for the future of the world. On two counts: climate action. We can boost public investments to accelerate the transition to the new climate economy, generate jobs, accelerate private investments, and do two things at the same time: deal with the COVID crisis and prevent the other crisis from hitting. The second is even more important, and it is dealing with inequalities. After pandemic, in the past, we have seen that in evidence, inequality goes up. The risk of inequalities within countries, like a tale of two cities, as Dickens wrote it, and inequalities across countries is very high. And policymakers ought to zero on that. I would be very frank to alert people that there is some space for more progressive taxation, and certainly more space for creatively using public money to help people to help themselves.
So here in the U.S., maybe you've heard about it. There was a recent U.S. election. What do you expect from the incoming Biden administration?
We work very closely with U.S. The U.S. is our largest shareholder, and we are particularly close to our membership at a time of crisis. So I expect that we will work constructively. We will focus on taking advantage of opportunities that coming out of crisis presents. Let me remind you, 2008, 2009, global financial crisis. The world took a lesson from it that a resilient banking system is paramount for our economies to function. Fast forward 10 years, we have a resilient banking system, and thank God. Imagine where we would have been with this pandemic without it. Now we need to draw lessons from this crisis of how to make ourselves more resilient in a world of accelerated change and more shocks. They are going to continue to come. And that opportunity, the fund can be a major agent of change with the support of our membership. And of course, as I said, US being our largest shareholder is, of course, a very critical voice.
What do you think,
look forward to work with the new administration.
What do you hope will change with how the Biden administration works with the IMF?
I must stress that when it comes down to financial stability, there is always a very sober attitude from the membership. And we found that in this crisis, within a month, we got the membership to support us to have the strength to support the most vulnerable members. We have gotten $1 trillion firing capacity, and part of it was in the bill sent to Congress to help the US economy, because if the world falls apart, of course, there are spillover impact on the US. So looking forward, I am very, very keen to work with the incoming administration on these big issues that would define whether we come out of this crisis more resilient or not. And they will be about the role of the fund to help our membership with strong policies that build resilience of people, the resilience of our planet, and the strength of our economies for the future. And I can say that on many of the issues, what I hear from the nominees, and especially the most important one for us, the Treasury Secretary, is incredibly exciting. It is what we want to do.
So do you feel that the IMF has enough firepower to address any other emergencies that might emerge on the horizon?
We do have a substantial firepower. We have a still capacity to lend another $720 billion, which is a good cushion. It gives comfort to countries to know they can come to the IMF if they need to, and we have the resources to help. Where we may need more imagination is how to help the low-income countries, emerging markets with weak fundamentals. Because if for countries with strong economies, access to markets is not a problem. We saw it after a short closing of accessibility in March, with the massive injection of liquidity from central banks and from finance authorities in advanced economies. Emerging markets with good fundamentals can borrow and they do. They actually borrow quite actively. Those who cannot, they need a fund that has the capability to lend concessionally or provide the currency of the fund, the special drawing rights, in a way that lifts up liquidity for these countries.
Okay, I want to ask a couple personal questions, if I may. How have your previous experiences, including your upbringing and education in Bulgaria, prepared you for your role at the IMF?
I was very fortunate to live through bad policies and how they can be reformed so economies can be performing better. So, of course, that serves me extremely well at the fund. When I talk to policymakers in countries that need to embrace reforms, I don't talk from a book. I talk from experience, why they need to do it, why it is critical for the competitiveness of their countries. But for this crisis, what prepared me for it is actually having been a crisis commissioner in the European Union. I had for 5 years front seat in the most dramatic humanitarian calamities, from the Haiti earthquake through the Syria crisis to the Japanese triple disaster. So what I learned as crisis commissioner, lean forward in a crisis and zero on the most vulnerable people, most vulnerable parts of the economy, and act decisively. And this is what we did, this is what we do.
Okay, so what have you learned about yourself during the pandemic?
Well, I think I learned that I'm a living, walking, and talking example of Eleanor Roosevelt's saying that women are like tea bags. We don't know how strong we are until you put us in hot water. So in hot water, boy, am I strong.
Boy, that's a great answer. Never saw that one coming. Okay, and my last question for you is, what have you found that you've cherished during the pandemic that you don't want to give up after these trying times eventually end?
The empathy we have for each other. The fact that when we are deprived for the normal things in life, to hug your loved ones, to talk with your colleagues face to face, we actually become even more social beings. And we genuinely care about each other. And that, I think, is a sentiment that I hope we would carry forward after we get the vaccines and the pandemic is in the rearview mirror.
Right.
We are in this together.
Kristalina, thank you for being such a strong cup of tea, and congratulations on your inclusion in the Bloomberg 50. It's been an absolute privilege to have you on the list, and also just want to say, sincere thank you to you for taking the time to speak with us today and to our audience.
Very honored. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brett Began, and I'm a senior editor at Bloomberg Business Week magazine. Thank you all for joining us here today. We have the honor of having three members of our annual Ones to Watch list with us. Tia Adiola, a fashion designer, Kwame Nwache, chef and author, and Nathan Tankis, the writer of Notes on the Crisis. And I'm just going to do some brief introductions here, and then we'll get started. Again, thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to start with Tia. So Tia is the founder and designer of her eponymous brand, Tia Adiola, and she's originally from Nigeria, raised in London, and now based in New York. And Tia actually started her first line, Slashed by Tia, in 2016, I believe out of her dorm room at the New School, which is pretty amazing. It quickly gained pretty huge following. Lots of people such as Gigi Hadid and other Instagram influencers, as well as young musicians, started wearing it. It really got a huge and passionate fan base. And more recently, Tia has been working on frilly masks that had been featured in the likes of publications like Teen Vogue. And in researching this, I learned more about Renaissance-inspired fashion than I ever thought I'd ever learn. So Tia, thank you for being part of this. Next up is Kwame Nwache. Kwame is a James Beard Award-winning chef. He's also the author of Notes from a Young Black Chef, which I believe is being made into a movie, and we'll get to talking about that shortly. Kwame was born on Long Island and raised in New York City and Nigeria and Louisiana, and was first exposed to cooking, if I have this right, in the family's Bronx apartment by your mother. So I'd like to come back to that at some point too. Trained in the CIA, that's the Culinary Institute of America, not the actual CIA. And this is the most impressive thing about Kwame is he's opened 5 restaurants before turning 30. It's like absolutely incredible to me, including the groundbreaking Afro-Caribbean restaurant Kith Kin in Washington, D.C. And Kwame was both a contestant on Top Chef, and I believe is going to be a judge on Top Chef, or perhaps that's already been taped. So no spoilers here, please, for those of us who haven't watched. And lastly, Nathan Tankis. Nathan, I just would be remiss if I didn't comment on how much I love your background there. That's amazing. Nathan is the research director of the Modern Money Network and is the publisher of the newsletter Notes on the Crisis. He grew up in Manhattan, where he currently lives, and is currently getting his bachelor's degree at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Nathan is 29, and at 29 has become a must-read for economists and government officials, thanks to his analysis of the Federal Reserve's actions to combat the COVID-19 recession, and has a really impressive Twitter following that includes the likes of Peter Orszag, as well as Alan Cole, and reporters from a lot of news organizations, including Bloomberg. When Peter Coy wrote that story about you, it was the first time that I heard about you, and it's pretty amazing what you've accomplished. So I'd love to get started here and just ask you guys a few questions. Mostly, I think because our audience is probably not totally familiar with your work, could you take us through just what you've been up to in the last 9 months? Tia, if you could, we'll start with you. Just walk us through what the pandemic has been like for you.
Oh, God. It started off pretty rough for me personally. I'm just going to be honest. I left New York right at the beginning of the pandemic. So in March, I went to Nigeria thinking, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to go back to my family for like 2 weeks, come back to New York, but then I got stuck there. And they closed the airport indefinitely. And, my brand is based here, my studio's here, my team's here. And so I sort of sulked for the first 2 weeks. And my mom was kind of like, you're a designer, like design something for the pandemic. And so I started looking back at like my fashion history references and like what face masks were looking like during that time period. And I sort of just started coming up with some face mask ideas and like put them out on social media, and people reacted really well to them. They sort of went viral and just sort of figured out other ways to be of help and of use during the pandemic. So I had a ton of contests where I had my audience tag family members who were nurses, doctors, and sent them face masks, professional medical face masks that were looked kind of cool that they would like want to wear for 24 hours. So yeah, I would say my main thing during the pandemic has been working on face masks and just like long-term plans, long-term collaborations, going with the flow.
Great, thank you so much. Kwame, tell us what you've been up to in the last 9 months and accomplishments that you'd love to highlight as well.
I've been trying to stay sane for the last 9 months. First of all, I want to shout out that Nigel's in the house. We got two people here from Nigeria, so that's always nice to see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think, I'll use the buzzword pivot. We've all had to pivot in this time, and maybe it's our mentality we're pivoting, what we are willing to sacrifice for our happiness, how we're pivoting in that regard. And then obviously, we're on Bloomberg, so our business, how are we pivoting within that? So for me, it mainly started in that order. It was like my mindset. I had to understand that this wasn't going anywhere, and I could either sit back and go on a ride, or I can jump into the driver's seat. So I jumped into the driver's seat. I left my restaurant. It didn't really make sense to operate a restaurant in this time frame. I'll be back with a vengeance when we can have a full dining room inside and outside. I started doing a lot of stuff on social media and getting brand partnerships. And then I started turning toward media in general. I have the movie that's in the works, so that got me in the rooms of a lot of production companies. So I started pitching them ideas for TV shows, digital series, unscripted, scripted. I started doing research on how to write. I started taking acting classes. So I was able to really thrive during this time because I just didn't stop. And I kept trying to do things. I understood that we had a lot of time and opportunity and space. And we were also able to omit things that weren't bringing us joy, that were kind of arduous and taking away from who we really were. And there's no better time than today that I've realized, especially during this pandemic, to do exactly what you want to do in life.
It's great. Thank you. Nathan, take us through what you've been up to.
Yeah, so my experience of the pandemic has been kind of strange because I think in some ways uniquely strange because it's been, frankly, career making for me in that, at early March, let's say like March 8th, March 9th, I started realizing what was happening, started paying attention more to what was going on in the crisis. I work on economic policy in general, but don't necessarily work on the week to week. But there's certain things that happened that made me stand up and take notice of what was going on a little bit before everyone else was catching up. And I realized that this was, going to be a gigantic crisis. And that we, early on, I think a little bit before other people started calling it a depression, thought of it as a depression. And I realized there weren't really people who were writing about it very, very rapidly, especially, the panoply of new programs that we were getting, the CARES Act, but also the Federal Reserve's crisis facilities. And I saw an opportunity to just write about that all the time. That first month I wrote 22 pieces within a month. I was publishing a piece basically every weekday, sometimes even a little bit more than that. And that was an opportunity to really make my career and get a lot of attention for a lot of knowledge that is, most useful in a crisis, but kind of sometimes can lay dormant in other periods. And so was able to build my own newsletter, which is very successful, and get a following, including a policy following, including people within the U.S. government and within the next U.S. government.
Thanks so much. I just want to ask you, you all work in very different fields. Internally, I've been referring to this as the fashion finance and food panel, right? And you all work in very different fields, but the thing that you have in common is that you're all young, and that you're facing this pandemic really at the beginning of your careers, or let's say in the first quarter of your careers. And I'm just curious, do you think that that has made this harder or easier than if you were certainly more advanced in your careers? Kwame, if you don't mind, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
I mean, I think youth is relative and it's a mindset. So I think that there are people that are, just starting out when they're 40 or 50. And there are people like me that I started when I was 5 years old. So in terms of my professional history and length of time, I think that I have a lot of experience. I have some more experience than people that are older than me, and in different facets. And I think once you understand, especially within every craft, but cooking, that you know nothing, then that kind of like broadens your mind to soak in so many different things. I've been a personal chef. I've been a chef on a boat. I've opened a restaurant. I've written a book. I'm just finished writing another book. So like once this thing hit, it was like, okay, well, I can no longer cook for people anymore. How can I use my other assets? And I think as a business, you need to look at always diversifying your streams of income and just diversifying who you are as a person, so that if something hits where I can no longer serve people directly, then do I switch to a ghost kitchen? Do I do things online? Do I do classes? Do I do more writing? Why don't I try to sign a book deal within this time? And that's really where it came from. So I don't really look at my youth as something that that deters me or gives me an advantage. I would say my professional prowess is something that I use to my advantage more than others.
Nathan, so take us through, obviously you said that the pandemic really afforded you an opportunity to launch your business. Do you think that was easier or harder given your age?
I mean, I think in certain senses it was easier. I mean, more flexibility. If I had been in a conventional job, I wouldn't have been able to put everything aside and to vote, at least the beginning, 80 to 100 hours a week, writing and thinking and reading about the crisis. So it was definitely an advantage in that sense, and definitely the motivation, the drive to do it. I can't speak for anyone older, but I'm not necessarily something that someone 45 or 50 would have done, even if they had the career flexibility to do it. Yeah, so I mean that's how I kind of think about it.
So, Nathan, how did you think? I'm just curious. How did you say? When was the moment where you said, "I have a voice on this, and I think I'm someone that other people with a lot of advanced degrees should be listening to"? On the one hand, it's sort of that's quite a sort of like moment to reach, but on the other hand, obviously you've been successful at it. When did you realize that, hey, I got something to say here?
I think it was really just that no one else was writing about it. I was being encouraged. My big moment has been this year, but I've already kind of built a large network. I have a lot of friends, including Bloomberg journalist friends. Joe Weisenthal was extremely supportive of me and my career, and basically tweeted out every piece I wrote for the first month. But I knew it was more that I knew no one else was writing clear explanations of what was going on. Reporters, they have an article, they have one theme that they have to hit. They don't have the space to, I'm going to write 3,000 words in a 7-part series on the technical details of what the Federal Reserve is doing. But they love to read it. They promote it when I put out, but that's not something that their organizations give them the flexibility to do, and it's not necessarily something that their audience would be served. My audience is, the people who are looking to explain these things to other people. So journalists, economists, other academics. There's people who have general subject matter expertise, but they're not necessarily spending 6 hours a day reading through the documents that are being put out that explain all the details. So there's people who have expertise who would love to have that information processed and condensed for them, and that's really what I provided, especially early on.
It sounds like you were not getting a ton of sleep in those first months.
No.
Tia, I'll pose the same question to you that I have with the others. So, you're basically about 4 years into your career, if I understand correctly. If Slash by Tia started in 2016 at New School, we're now 4 years in. How do you think, given that you're early on in your career still, even though you met with great success, how do you think that the pandemic has impacted you and your business as opposed to maybe if you were a little bit more advanced in the career at this point?
It's been very challenging. I literally graduated college last summer, and like I just liked making clothes, and I was sort of just thrown into this business. So it sort of forced me to just think forward and like think of how I was gonna grow my brand and actually make it into something bigger, expanding beyond apparel. So like I've been working on releasing sunglasses and like footwear, and like Kwame said, like tapping into other things that I've been fortunate enough to learn and experience. So I studied media in college, and I took so many classes on directing and film. So my spring summer 21 collection is coming out in like a week or two, and I'm releasing it in the form of a film that I shot about, I want to say like a month ago. And it was so tedious, so many COVID tests, like sleepless nights, writing a script, making clothes. But I would have never had time to produce a film and make a collection at the same time if I wasn't stuck at home, So it's made me more creative. It's made me think outside the box more, and it's made me more like be able to adapt better to things. I feel like, I just don't know what 2020 is going to throw at me next, but I kind of feel like I'll be ready to just like plan forward and just like keep going.
Great. So we have about 2.5 minutes or so, and I would just be remiss if I didn't ask you. Obviously, we don't know when all of this is going to be behind us, pandemic-wise. But what are you looking forward to most for 2021? Nathan, we'll start with you on this one.
I'm looking forward to seeing if we're going to get a fiscal package through Congress. I mean, as in terms of my personal career, I feel like I'm set. I'm satisfied with where I am. There might be some more projects that I'm looking to take on, but mainly I'm writing about the crisis every day, so that really puts me in the mindset of looking at the details of that. And in my day-to-day life, I think the distress of the complete failure of the federal government to act overrides any sort of personal happiness with my career or anything else that's going on.
Tia, just what are you looking forward to in 2021? Tia, can you?
Wait, was that for me?
Oh
yeah.
Sorry,
I'm sorry.
Tia,
What did you say?
I just said if you could take us through what you're looking forward to in 2021.
Hopefully Corona being over. That's like really wishful thinking, but just like not living in a pandemic,
That makes sense. Kwame, I'll give you the last word here.
I'm looking to do everything. I'm looking to fulfill my dreams and, get more into media. I'm looking for my movie to come out. I'm looking for my book to drop. I'm looking forward to continue to grow as a person, mentally, physically, everything. I'm just looking forward to life in general, because life is a beautiful thing. We should cherish it. There's always going to be some sort of pandemic, there's racial or, airborne or whatever, but we have the power to control our own destiny and do whatever we put our minds to. So I'm looking forward to doing it all.
Thank you so much. And just a huge thank you to all three of you for joining us today, to Tia and to Kwame and to Nathan. We really appreciate you being part of this panel, and we look forward to you being on the Bloomberg 50 in the years to come. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to be here in the company of our honorees, who not only excelled in their fields, but who had an impact far beyond them. Today, we celebrate you.
We do indeed. Congratulations to all of our honorees.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja. I'm a reporter for Bloomberg News and Bloomberg Quick Take. And I'm so excited to be here today with two award-winning producers whose music has certainly made an impact on my life. I can name off all of the songs that I've been listening to for years, but they've also really changed the music industry in 2020 with the creation of Verses. So I wanted to welcome Timbaland and Swiss Beats to the Bloomberg 50. Hey, guys, how's it going?
Thank you. Thank you. How you doing?
Good. I mean, this is so surreal for me and really exciting. I mean, first of all, congratulations on the success of Versus. I mean, it's been really great to watch sort of how it's grown in 2020. But, you know, I wanted to ask first, what are the origins of Versus? I mean, I know it's something the two of you had been talking about for years, but how did it come to be in 2020? What happened?
Timberlake can start.
I knew he was gonna do that. I think it was in divine favor. I mean, it was an idea that was brewing 3.5 years ago, and we didn't think it would be digital, of course, but it took up. It's like it's its own machine, and we started off with me and Swiss. I called him. I was baiting him in, like, you know, just antagonizing him on IG. And then he saw what I was doing. And then I said, yo, we should just do what we did in New York right now. He's like, let's go. And we went 5 hours, and 5 hours turned into what you see today.
Yeah.
And I know, yeah, you said 5 hours, and Swiss, you were in your car at one point too, right?
Yeah, the Wi-Fi in the house was getting changed at that time. I didn't think about that until it was on, but when it was on, couldn't make up no excuses. So went in my friend's car actually and did it from a little boombox radio in the car, and the rest was history.
So then at what point did it go from just being, you know, you two friends, huge producers, doing a one-off back and forth on IG Live to it being the massive success that it is now? I mean, I wonder when it hit both of you that this was really going to change the way we consume music.
I think it was the Teddy Riley and Babyface. because that was a real defining moment for verses. Because a lot of people tried to count verses out at that minute and say that, oh, that was just something during the quarantine, that was something during COVID. It was nice while it lasted. Not even knowing that we didn't even begin yet. You know, we still feel that we didn't even begin yet. We gave you the trailer of the movie, but the rest of the movie is still to come. But the Babyface and Teddy Riley was real because we went through a real obstacle sound-wise, and we crashed the system at Instagram at that time, which I thought was a good thing, but a lot of people was kind of making fun of what we was doing. And then we came right back around with the announcement of the rematch less than 24 hours and made up for all of that, then broke the records that night. So I think when we came back, it showed the power of verses. And then when Teddy Riley and then Babyface numbers went up by the millions, and that's when the verses effect, I think, started. Then we started to really notice that what we have is very strong.
Timbaland, you agree too? That was the moment?
I mean, that was, because it was, I feel like it was the clarifying moment for me to let you know when you got something big, you got to go through trials and tribulation. And that was a big trial. And like Swiss said, like people were counting us out. Oh, this a joke. Oh, this ain't gonna last. Then we just came right back. And then after that, it became super real.
Right. Was the verses, I mean, you mentioned the verses effect. Was that something that the two of you foresaw happening? I mean, now there's, people have merchandise. My friend went and bought a Brandy shirt after the Brandy versus Monica versus. I mean, did you see the effects of versus happening, or was it slowly, was it a slow progression that you saw after the Teddy Riley Babyface face-off?
No, we've been seeing the versus effect even from Dante, Austin, and Neo. A lot of people didn't know who Dante was. Then a lot of artists started calling him for work. Every artist that has been on verses has some type of versus effect, and we think that, we even look at the awards last night and how Brandy got an award, Monica got an award, and versus is a platform meant to celebrate and remind people of our greats. It's an educational celebration platform, although it's called versus, and the artists do feel like they're in a battle in some sort, but it's really a celebration and an educational celebration. But to see the versus effect get people on those stages, not that they're not talented, but we just go with what was happening before, But it's an honor, and we're blessed, and we're happy for all of the artists that's on verses, which is why we picked them to be on verses, because they're so talented that we need to be talking about them today, not only what they did yesterday, but still giving them their garden and their roses today, and letting them get their respect that is due.
Agreed.
And talk to us about, Timbaland, did you have something to add?
No, I just said I agree.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask too, I mean, whenever the artists are announced, it's huge news. I mean, people make playlists and stuff leading up to it and have watch parties, but give us a little bit of like an inside look. How do you pick the artist? How do you know that they're going to work together on stage?
It's me and Swiss really like are curators, like it's really like you said, it's a playlist. And we kind of like sometimes we a pair, I might make something, he'd be like, it might be too slow for the whole night, So it's like we try to make the pairs to make it feel like a amazing playlist, because when you put a Patti LaBelle and a Gladys Knight, when you look at their songs, it's just that feeling. You don't never want that feeling to go away. So it's more of a curation. Me and Swiss just think about it, the best curation it could be.
And how does it differ putting together a versus event versus being in the studio? I mean, do you feel like you're sort of flexing the same muscles, or is it more stressful? Are you having to think about all the logistics? What's it like compared?
two different things. Two totally different things. With versus, you're dealing with multiple layers. You know, we have our Apple team. With Larry Jackson. You have our Roland team. You have our Instagram, Fadi at Instagram. You have Twitter. The Twitter team with the analytics. Then you have our own personal in-house digital team with Dima. Then you have all the artists and the artist management team and their tech team and their team, and all of their requirements, requests, and it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. By the time the verses is over, I'm definitely looking for a nap. But all of the work that me and Tim put in and our entire team put in, the results have just been pushing us to the next level. One can complain that this is that is this, but the one thing that we're excited about is changing the world and inspiring the world and celebrating the creative. So that's what's keeping us going.
It's coming from a great place.
Yeah. What impact would you say Instagram has had on its success? Because, I mean, prior to Versus, people didn't really know what to do with IG Live, right? And now you're getting millions of people tuning in. Do you think that's had some effect on the success of Versus?
I don't know if I think it was a match made in heaven. I think it was good for both parties. I mean, it's a platform to reach everybody. We was locked in, and we can't do it in an arena. So this is our arena, our phone. So what I'm saying, I'm into technology, so I'm like, all the kids things just came back on lockdown. Like, ooh, we can still reach people through this. We can use this to build that. Because I'm looking at my kids play with TikTok, and I'm like, this thing went to another level. I remember those effects and those things used to cost millions of dollars, and now it's at the disposal of our hands. So I believe it's all about Swiss is such a creator. Like, if you look at his art, his everything about him, and this just go hand in hand to what we are as creators. It's a platform for creators, and I think Instagram and what we created is a perfect marriage.
Do you see a Versus in which it's not on IG Live, or do you want to continue to keep it on the platform?
Well, I think that you can watch Versus on Apple TV as well. It's in millions of TVs in your homes. It's on your phones. It's in HD quality. A lot of people like Instagram and Versus because of the chat. But I feel that if we would have started Versus anywhere, people would have been there because of seeing the talent and the concept that we have now. I feel that me and Tim was very wise on using certain platforms that already had hundreds of millions of dollars invested into it, where we can just plug in our concept rather than sitting there trying to go develop the same type of technology just to say we own the technology. I think that time would have took away from what was needed and what's still needed at this time. It's still 100% African American owned at this moment. Myself and Tim, and I think that we've been navigating pretty well and making smart decisions. And we're going to continue to advance. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to just push the envelope.
And what do you see as the next evolution of Versus? I mean, once we're out of quarantine, will there be a Versus on stage one day that people can go and watch? I mean, what's up your sleeves, if you can share anything with us?
Sky's not the limit. It's just a view. Of course, people, would love to see those performances and things on stage, but me and Tim feel that if we are going to do that, we have to make that unique and not so predictable. So there has to be some curation there, although it's a great, obvious concept. We definitely going global with it. We haven't hit the Latin market yet. We haven't hit the African market yet. We haven't hit the Europe market yet. We haven't hit the Asian market yet. So we have big plans on expanding. That's why I said that, we haven't even started yet. But we also know the importance of giving the ground foundation audience what they want and what they need, not just skipping all over the place, right? So if you notice, there's a rhythm that happens, and we know what the people want. The people tell us what they want. We get to see all of the analytics of what the people want, not only what me and Tim and our partners see, but also what the people want, and that to us is the biggest thing. So sometimes we have to change versus at the last minute and make different maneuvers, but it's all for the people.
Can you tell us anything more about season 2?
Woo!
Please. I mean, you said you want to know what the people want. People want to know.
But like, look at your excitement. You more excited not knowing.
No, but but Tim, let's talk about season 2, which just happened that season 2, which was groundbreaking, groundbreaking. Two brothers came together after a long time feud. Young Jeezy and Gucci Man. I'm on an interview. Sorry, Dad, homeschooling.
It's tough. And Stacey Abrams too. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yes, opening up with positivity, and to see those two brothers come together and solve their differences. I think that verse has saved many lives and gave great examples of our culture. Of you can have a problem, no matter how bad the problem is, and still find some way to come out with some positivity. In our culture, we only get the highlights and negativity. So for the highlights of those two brothers to come together with love at the end and letting the world know that it's peace, that was probably my best verses now.
Really?
Yes. Wow. Yeah, because it was,
Timbaland, you feel the same way?
Because it was the healing to the most highest. It really said something for Atlanta. Like, it really done something. It moved. People called me as like, man, we can breathe. We don't have to. It's just it fixed, it kind of cleared the gap. It put a hole right in the gap that was already, it needed to be healed in Atlanta. And to me, that was the best version. Yes. But being from the South.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying just being from.
Yeah, and I was just gonna close and say, as you mentioned, this may not have been possible, what we saw with Jeezy and Gucci Mane prior to Versus, having a platform like that. So I think it's really powerful that was even able to happen.
Yeah, very, very, very powerful. Shout out to Jeezy, shout out to Gucci, shout out to P, shout out to Solo. There was a lot of hands that came, Larry Jackson, a lot of hands that helped make that possible. That was a real heavy but needed lift. And it was a great way to start season 2 off very strong. And we're going to follow up very strong, but unpredictable, but very strong. And
so you're not going to tell me?
Yeah. Well, we're thinking about some ladies. I give it. That's it. I'm gonna give you that.
Great. Well, I will stay tuned. But I just want to thank the two of you. I know you're super busy, but we're really excited to have you part of the Bloomberg 50 this year, and hope you have a nice holidays with your families.
Thank you, and shout out to our partner Ciroc as well. We didn't shout out Ciroc, and we know our brother P. Diddy's gonna be there. I like the interview, but
Ciroc is always there, right in the middle. You can't miss it.
Yeah, yeah. They was the first ones to really step up and
Yes.
and help us. You know, early in the stage, because we don't have a lot of sponsors and things like that. And Puff was there for the vision, so you know, he get that placement.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question? Do you plan on adding more sponsors, or are you being very selective about who you bring in?
Very, 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 very selective. I mean, we've turned down super millions of dollars because it has to be the right fit. You know, it has to be the right fit, and we're open to different unique partners, but it just have to fit, and it has to be something easy that that the artists agree with, because we let the artists have their own sponsors and they keep all of the proceeds of the sponsors that they have, as long as it's, you know, something that fits our format in a respectful way.
Good to hear. Well, I'm going to stay tuned. I don't want to take too much of your guys' time, but again, thank you so much. I know you have to get back to homeschooling, so thank you so much for your time.
Thank
you.
Hi, guys.
Bloomberg
Nice to meet
50.
you. Yay! Please come back. Bye.
What an impressive group of leaders we've been able to talk with today. Congratulations to our Bloomberg 50 honorees. Thank you all for your participation so far, and there's more to come. I would like to welcome my colleague Stephen Colvin, Chief Commercial Officer of Bloomberg Media. Stephen?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Joel. Thanks to all of you, everybody, for being here today. What an amazing event with such insightful and truly inspiring conversations. Through events like the Bloomberg 50, Bloomberg Invest Global, and our recent Bloomberg New Economy Forum, as well as with our newly launched editorial franchises such as Bloomberg Green, Bloomberg City Lab, and Bloomberg Wealth, our goal at Bloomberg Media is to provide you, our audience of global business leaders and influencers, with world-class journalism, data-driven insights, and the analysis you need to make more informed decisions, and to invent new possibilities within your organizations and your communities. It is my sincere hope that today's event provided you with some new tools and perspectives to do just that. And perhaps you've even had a little bit of fun also today, or should I say fun so far today, because the celebration of businesses that have made an impact, a significant impact this year, isn't over. Next up, please join us for a special Bloomberg think tank. The customer comes first. All you need to do to attend is go back to the agenda tab on this event screen and click into the 4:30 p.m. think tank session. Our discussion will feature a one-on-one interview with Brian Nicole, CEO of Chipotle Grill, followed by a roundtable discussion including senior executives from Groupon, Nordstrom, Fila, GSK, Consumer Healthcare, Prudential, Chewy, and more. An amazing group of business leaders. I'd like to say a sincere thank you to Salesforce for making today's Bloomberg 50 event possible, as well as this special upcoming think tank session possible. And when the think tank session is finished, please do visit the sponsor section of this event, a website, if you haven't already, for the Salesforce State of the Connected Customer Report. So thank you again, everybody. See you all in the next session. Bye-bye.